Hi, this is Steve Schmidt, your co-host for the Foundation episode with Wrench. We are with Dan Baird, founder and CEO of Wrench out of Salt Lake City. I also have Brian Grover on, co-founder and chief content officer for Magnetic. We will be both asking questions to Dan. Gabby did not want to come on the show. She's too busy in the toolbox, making sure that everything is being spun up from a product marketing standpoint. Dan, thank you so much for joining us on this Foundation episode today. How is the weather? Let's just bridge it with a very obvious question that they said you should never ask in a sales call, number one, so pay attention. Never bridge a question with the weather. But how's the weather in Salt Lake City today?
It's that cold, dry, gray sky looking thing that it only does a handful of days a year, but yeah, it's one of those. It's the everything moves slow to wake up in the morning type of day here. Yeah.
When you originally thought about AI, did you think about the simple things where people were dropping these terrible emails about the restaurant in your town, the weather in your environment, and people were calling that personalization? Where were you when you were entering this space when that was going on? Because I know you were with Crack the Crowd prior to Wrench. You're not new to founding companies. You probably saw all that going on and you said that just doesn't do it.
No,
it's about 7 layers deeper. So walk us back to how your original thought was, because this is not a new thought. You founded it with this thought.
Yeah.
What was the train of thought there?
We were working at a company called Crack the Crowd, digital strategy firm that was built and designed in that space to help people launch equity crowdfunding ventures, right? So this is like pre-crypto type stuff. And it actually, a lot of the technology that we built became a lot of the stuff that you see in the crypto markets. But our job there was to basically take a company that was either, some of them were brand new mom and pop style startups, bootstrapped. Others were really large real estate, like some of the largest companies on the planet, not exaggerating. Their job was to basically deal with this new communication. 2014 was like the Jobs Act went live. It made it legal for the first time in 80 years to talk publicly about your startup and your fundraising for equity type of ventures. So this was like a new communication form essentially in the United States, where you went, hey, I'm actually raising money publicly. Before then, you had to call people on the phone. They had to be vetted, accredited investors. We went, holy crap, there's a brand new method for actually fundraising that we thought was really disruptive, right? It allowed you to basically test demand before you actually even had to build the product. That's pretty damn disruptive. That was a big deal. And then simultaneously, this new kind of method of communicating where you still had a lot of the restraints and constraints of no forward-looking statements, which is a fancy way of just saying, like, look, when you're talking to investors, what you say is regulated. You can't lie. You can't exaggerate. You have to warn people about what they're getting into. And so it wasn't something that you could just do. And we went, okay, this is a big problem and a big challenge. And we've, based on our work at Crack the Crowd, we were kind of that digital strategy firm that would get hired by the platforms. So like effectively the Kickstarter equivalents in the equity space would hire us and say, hey, come in, do some segmentation, help us understand what helps and separates the campaigns that do well from the ones that fail, and then help us develop content that helps more people succeed. And the dirty little secret, we knew where all the bodies were buried. And the dirty little secret was that the billion-dollar companies made the exact same mistake that the tiny shops did. They basically came in with a one-size-fits-all message. They didn't segment their populations to talk about like the people that were in their inner circle and the people that could help them get the message out. They just went one-size-fits-all. We went, okay, first things first. The simplest thing that you have to do, we need you to come in, develop your inner circle. Who are you going to talk to that already gets it? We need you to figure out who your influencers are. And we need you to figure out who all the associates or the early adopters are after that, because at least those three groups need different messaging. Really, really simple strategy. And I can tell you, like, we saw stuff, again, commercial real estate ventures, stadium level stuff, jets, people that were developing jets, new technology, and anything all the way down to like tiny little consumer products. And they made those same mistakes. So we went, okay, this needs to be a thing. We went and we developed the software to start helping people walk through it. We hired one of the smarter minds in big data. He took one look at it and he went, this is a big problem for all go-to-market. This is not just limited to the fundraising space.
Yeah.
And that's where we started going, okay, we potentially have something that, as we call it here, can put a dent in the universe. And we wanted to put a damn dent in the universe. So,
well, and I think that let's speak about how we met each other, right? So I was running a lead gen agency.
Mhm.
I thought, well, what a concept. These people come to us and we can get quicker to the market. That lead agent was just ending at that time, right? So when I came back and revisited the conversation, early stages of Magnetic, pre Brian Grover, month 6, I think Brian came in 5. And I kind of had to table it, right? It was one of those things where probably like a lot of founders, and let's talk about that being the fits for you, said, man, I got a big problem to solve. And you look at it and you go, I know we can solve it. And then they go, okay, cool. Thanks, Dan. And they move on with their life and they forget about the problem, that the big problem, because we can address that based off your first response, which is messaging is seemingly overlooked. Why is that? Why aren't we seeing that being the first culprit versus a lot of the other things that are segmented out in terms of MQLs and all the noise going on in demand gen, like the actual message itself and what message we're sending to whom and how it's measured? Why has that been so traditionally overlooked in your opinion?
A lot of people don't know what to say. So, like, when you go in and you get into the psychology of how someone receives a message, everyone knows this, even though they don't speak this or they don't recall this, but everyone forgets what you actually say on the phone, any sort of cold outreach, whatever. They always forget the details. They always remember the rosiest version. If you say, hey, it's between 1 and 10, if 1
Yeah.
is cheap, they only remember the number 1, right? Everyone does that. Well, the reality is people have so much going on. We're bombarded with choices that they remember how you made them feel. They don't remember what you said. This has been true forever. But when you ask someone what do, they tend to answer with the technical answer and not actually kind of the benefit or the emotional benefit of what your work accomplishes, right?
Hmm.
Messaging is the exact same way. So I spent and did a master's in branding, and this was a lot of what we did. We would actually develop the message. So like if you go to someone, say they're like the office administrator, right? You ask them what they do, they say, I'll answer the phones.
Yeah.
What they do is establish the culture of the office. We make sure that every client feels like their needs are being met. We make sure that this is a warm atmosphere where people can work, disagree, and get things done, right? I'd pay a hell of a lot more for the latter than the former, even though they're technically the same thing, right? Branding and this positioning and this messaging is that same phenomenon, and just most people have never, ever, ever been taught that. But if you go look at the gold standard, the best websites you can think of, go to Apple right now, and you will see that there is actually a repeated messaging structure on their home pages and on their product pages that does that. They have a title. It's usually less than 8 words. They have a subtitle. It's usually less than 8 words. They have a hero photo. And then if you start to scroll down, then you get into paragraphs and bullets. When people communicate, they usually do almost the exact opposite. And they start with the bullet points. I answer the phones, right? The title is always thinner. Think different. Think different. Nike, just do it. None of that talks about the rubber in the shoes, the cloth, the technology that got them to engineer that specific shoe. They start with what is, I would call that emotional benefit. How did you make them feel? And every piece of your communication should reflect that. When you get into the second, you're almost like, if you look at those pages and those messages, you're almost asking for people's permission to get more and more of their attention. So you start at the top with an extremely short message that speaks to that emotional benefit. And then as you get more permission and you scroll down the page, you get a little bit deeper. And it's okay, we'll tell you a little bit more about what we mean with those functional benefits, what it
Yeah.
accomplishes. And then we get a little bit deeper into actual, hey, here's the proof, what we call the reasons to believe, where
Yeah.
that's where you start putting it. I'll answer the phones. I'll make sure that the office is unlocked and everything else. That allows them to get through it. But almost no one has actually had that training and that messaging. But it is how efficient messages are actually built and utilized. And go look at the best websites and everything else that you look at. You will see that pattern everywhere, whether they're consciously doing it or not. But it works. It
Yeah.
absolutely works. Almost no one gets taught that, though.
On the flip side of that, though, you also touched on another thing about segmentation. And actually, Steve and I we were talking about this last week. Like, if you're standing in the middle of Michigan Stadium, you get 107,000 people. How do you think you can try to talk to those people all at the same time? You can't. How do you think about the matchup between messaging and segmentation?
So the matchup between the messaging and the segmentation is just number one, recognizing that if you're in that stadium, there may be that many people there, but you guys, and I'm sure everyone's seen it. You guys seen that, like how to develop a movement YouTube video where the guy's at the concert dancing by himself outside from that TED talk?
No.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So the reality is you may have 100,000 people in front of you or whatever, but the ones that actually matter is actually a very, very, very small proportion of them. Because when people think about the targeting for their messaging, right? So the message is your arrow, right?
Mm.
And they think about a bullseye and a target, and they go, yep, I need to hit that thing dead center. And that's how they think about it. You got to actually think it's a chronological thing. If you take that bullseye and you turn it sideways so that the nose of the bullseye is at the very front of that kind of messaging, you need to actually start with a very, very small group that is already in the tent, under the tent, in the inner circle.
Yeah.
You want to start with the people that already get it. And your job there is not to convince them whether or not it's a good idea. It's to actually join you in your movement and actually move them through that process.
It's a big
So,
one. Let's double click on this, Dan. So I want to make
sure.
this as real as possible. We've just gone, Brian, we had 12, Q2, we had 17 meetings.
Yep.
Q3, we had 12. Q4, we've had 47.
Yep.
And we've been playing around with our messaging a lot. And so I just wanted to double click on that because I think as we're stumbling into it and writing for ourselves, we can't help but have to go back and say, have we finally been able to nail a piece of this by finally articulating a message that resonates? And was that the force multiplier that we could go back and say, even without using Wrench, that's round 2, where we're going to be applying that, we really nailed our messaging because we have more appointments? Or do we go, God, we got a lot of more appointments, and now we're going to have to measure it to go, oh, by the way, that was the wrong message because none of them bought, or they all ended up being the worst customers? Like, walk me through that, because I think that's something that if you could forecast for a CEO, like, yeah, go ahead and use that messaging. This is what 12 months from now looks like. That would be extremely beneficial.
Sure. In those early stages, you're oftentimes focusing not necessarily one, yes, you do want to have those conversations, but you're almost more so. Good book, Eric Ries. Basically, he talked about, he did the Lean Startup is the book. But he talks about basically learning and building accounting. Like, one of the first things that you do is not necessarily test if your message externally works. It's not a projection thing. It's actually a conversation. It's the equivalent of a focus group. Go and get that really tiny, tiny group of people that are already getting it.
Okay,
right?
is that like Winter then? What they're doing with message testing?
Winter?
WYNTER, Winter. They
I'm
do
not
message
familiar with
testing. They can take messaging and they'll message ICP, and then I get paid as a member of that ICP to then say what I think of that message.
Yeah, that's the premise of a focus group, right? So like when you do focus groups, the two that you want to do, first group that you do, you want people that you'd call your core ICP. Again, people that are under the tent. They already get it. They're already convinced. You go to them and you ask them about your vision. You go, hey, did I get this right? In terms of the roadmap, are we talking about the right destination? Because they know, they already get what's really cool about the space. They've already heard it from other players, including you. So the feedback from that group is really, really important. The second group that you go talk to is actually the external ring of that bullseye. It's the people that are the furthest out. Yes, you could sell to them, but they're actually the hardest to convert. They're the most pragmatic. They're the ones that need the most education and the largest discounts to convert. Yes, they'll still buy, but they take work. You go to that group and you go,
I feel like we're just leading into this. How do I find those people, Dan?
well, so that is one. So most people, it's not the most people spend a lot of money or skip that step, quite frankly. One, they oftentimes don't even know to do it, because when they think ICP, they just assume that you're either binary. It's either one and they're it, or two and they're not. And reality is, no, there's so many grades on that spectrum that it's ridiculous. People with the same job title that work in the target company, or you guys have met a million people that were not satisfied with their job. They didn't believe they should be where they currently were. And they were side by side with the same person that got really fired up on that call and loved it. Happens all the time.
Yeah.
Salespeople don't recognize that for what it is. One is an early adopter and the other is a late adopter, right? That's basically what we're talking about. And that's what our tech does. That was what the Wrench innovation was we'll basically we'll research your target. We'll basically plug into the interwebs. We'll pull publicly available data. We'll mine your existing CRM and we'll tell you which one is which is a big deal, because by knowing if we got our vision right, you get those people that start to help you build that movement, help you get the word out, help make introductions to other people who already get it. Way easier sale, way shorter sales cycle, way better, easier conversations. But if you start mixing in and you go, okay, this one's under the tent, and then that one, yeah, they'll buy, but holy crap, are they a pain in the ass to get over
Yeah.
the finish line? You start mixing up your message. You
Yeah.
start going, okay, well, yeah, we need to throw in discounts. It's like, if you're talking to people that are under the tent, they're usually not that price sensitive. They get it, right? They're working on stuff. This is very specifically when you're working on new products, new technology. It's a very big deal to recognize which one is which. And heretofore,
Yeah.
people spent a lot of money, spent a lot of time. They did surveys and things like that to try to figure out who it was. They could mine their customer data
Yeah.
and say, okay, who bought? Or we could like poll our sales team and go, hey, which one was which? And then break them in. But when you do
Yeah.
those focus groups and you're developing that message,
Mm-hmm.
get 2 focus groups, one for people who get it and one for people who don't, and ask them questions accordingly.
Yeah.
You ask the first group, do we have the right vision? Are we headed in the right direction? What are we missing? What isn't authentic? And then the second group, why aren't you buying? What needs to be more pragmatic? What kept you from going over the finish line? What do we need to mitigate?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you blend the two, now you can capture everyone in between them. And when you go to market, you realize like, I need to be able to adapt a little bit. It is not a one size fits all. Do you want a script? I go, you kind of want an outline. You want to be able to go, hey, this is kind of what I need to be ready for between the two. And I need to be able to adapt that message accordingly to the person that picks up the phone or responds to that email.
Is it, if I were to break this down, Brian and I have talked about this a lot through the last 6 months of my life, a dating app or not dating app world. We won't get into it or the current status of that because I don't think it reflects the dating apps very positively, but they're using data, right? And if I had to look at this in its simplest form, I'm like, well, it's kind of like a dating app for businesses, right? I need to align you with the people who are most compatible, even maybe a step further where you're saying, oh, by the way, what's your attachment style? Like, what is that other thing I wish I knew before the first date, Is that really the easiest way to describe Wrench? It would be like the easiest way to align you with that segment.
Yeah, that's actually very true. I mean, people love to talk to people like, again, they say opposites attract, and for the most part, that's actually not true. People like to talk about stuff and people that have similar interests. No surprise that that phenomenon extends into stuff like personality traits. Extroverts love to talk to other extroverts. Introverts actually appreciate other introverts. They know the rules of the road. It's easier to navigate that conversation. There's a little bit more stress that comes with an introvert and an extrovert combined. And it's not that much and it's not a big deal, but it does add a little bit of stress and it actually takes a little bit longer for them to hit it off. So yeah, you could actually say this is a lot of the same premise that those dating apps do. Do you like the same types of activity? I mean, again, that's all they're doing. They're going through those dimensions of like, what do you do for fun? What movies do you watch? Because the more compatible you are, the more likely you are to hit it off. Now, if you think about it,
yeah, but most businesses aren't even doing that, Dan, right? So they're like dating everybody. They're like in Michigan Stadium, like throwing out a fishing line, being like, let's get it on,
Oh, man. I go to conferences where they talk about personalization, and this is the type of stuff I expect them to be talking about. This is how we better connect people that have like fundamental connections. Because what you are is you're trying to accelerate developing that relationship, that honest conversation. And what I end up when I show like, yeah, we're doing AI. And then what is it? It's like, oh, they landed on a web page that was around hamburgers. Therefore, they must love hamburgers. And I go, have you ever seen how people browse the web? They're all over the place. They come to your website 50 something times before they submit a form. They ask for the same piece of white paper material 10 times. Like no. Buyer's journeys are not these magical, like chronological, perfect 1, 2, 3, 4 types of journeys. They're all over the place. They bounce around. They're messy. And so when they get into I'm astounded at how much of the tech in the entire space like has these beautiful notions of. It boils down to like, hey, we're putting their name in the email subject line. It's like, wow, huzzah.
How did the subject lines go in 2023? That's what I was going to say. It's like the biggest topic of conversation was the one thing that didn't work progressively throughout the year. So I'd say none of that feedback worked. And that's just kind of the stuff where I look at it on the surface and go, man, it'd be great if someone could read a post about this kind of stuff with the same excitement and vigor that they do subject lines and emails. But to me, it goes deeper because this is controlled. And let's dig into this. And then Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you for some questions. This is the nerd out question. So we're going to click into this and go, okay, so what? How many companies out there are using this type of data in your guesstimate? What percentage as they go to market, Series A, B, pre-seed?
Very, 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 very few.
Less than 5%?
There were 47,000 AI companies generated in 2023 so far. That's some more because that stat's already probably a month or two old. I was talking to one of the kind of like more senior people at AWS about it. And my joke was, hey, maybe 47% of them actually include AI, this type of stuff that can actually make these decisions.
Yeah.
His response verbatim to me was, I'd be surprised if 47 did. The reality is that like oftentimes people plug into GPTs and they think that that's kind of like a catch-all. Hey, I've figured it out. No. In many ways, that can actually exacerbate the problem of people basically using an average as a decisioning metric. Most companies, again, really big, savvy, very few. There's a long way to go. I think you guys are probably pretty good at recognizing when someone wrote something with GPT, they mention your school mascot or something. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, all right, like token cheesy. It's not getting to you as a human.
So if you know that, it's probably less than 5%, right? Maybe companies are utilizing this kind of data. Okay, so knowing it's the cheat code it is, why aren't more companies using it?
The last 5 years have been around data silos. Like GPT technology, right? OpenAI. AI has been around for 25, 30, 40 years, right? Yeah. It's not new tech. The headache in the last 5 years, Wrench started 5 years ago. And one of the first hurdles that we found was not necessarily being able to actually demonstrate what the tech can do. It was getting the data that allowed it to process. Like everybody's CRM held together with duct tape. Everybody's. Breaking down those data silos has largely been the efforts of most of the people working in the AI space for the last 5 years. Like the Zapier type stuff, Clay, like almost all of those tools are actually just, hey, we made data engineering, basically getting the data to talk nicely back and forth from LinkedIn to CRM to whatever, to Stripe to whatever. Has largely been the focus for the last 5 years. And you're just seeing people like pop their head out beyond that, like in the last kind of like 12 months. So, I mean, one of the main things from GPT, OpenAI, the innovation there, if you go talk to like the professionals and the experts, it wasn't that they invented a new algorithm. It's that they put immediate feedback into the consumer's hands where they could literally ask the AI a question and get an immediate response within seconds.
Yeah.
That, because of all the data preparation, used to take 65 to 85% of your budget just to get the AI to work. It's the data and getting it to talk nicely from one to the other has been a huge hurdle for years, and it's just starting to come down.
They're not doing it. They can't manage it. On top of that, and this is just me, because we're just deploying V2 of our Wrench. Now I've got to segment messaging. I've got scores in my CRM. I've got to write a separate email to everybody. I've got a large TAM, and I just go like, how do I possibly make that work where I can go out to, let's say I have a TAM of 10,000 people, right? I've got to reach all of them in 1 year. I've got to deploy Wrench, which gives me the ability to do what, and then what do I do with that year one so I can make that work?
Think about it as an Olympic swimming pool. So before you jump into the deep end, you wade into the deep end, right? You start at the shallow end of the pool. We go through like anyone would. We're using AI to, it's number one thing. If you go ask everybody, like what is the ROI from your investment in AI? If they don't say productivity first, I'm very much surprised. Almost always it's the manpower tools that are actually more effective. You can get a consistent, like most of the AI assistants that they launched, right? That was basically taking a lot of work that, heretofore you'd probably assign to like an intern and make it pretty close to instant and about at that quality, right?
Yeah.
So first things first, you would have an intern. Hey, can we go through and actually do the research on these 10,000 individuals and basically try to figure out who is who, right? Let's put them into those buckets. Who are the people that are already under the tent? It's probably a very small proportion of them, right?
Couple hundred.
Less than 10%, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 2%, 3%. Very common.
And I'm going to go hug those people.
Yes, very much. Seth Godin used to talk about them as your 1,000 raving fans, right? You wanted to go figure out, all right, who the hell is really, really, really tight? They get it. They can tell me about the vision. They already know it. I don't have to explain things to them. You want to go basically segment them into the kind of those influencers, set them aside. People that have large followings, editors or other writers and journalists can be included too, regardless of their following, because they have that platform. And a big part of their job, if you will, is getting the word out. And you have to kind of pay attention to them anyways, just because like if Kim Kardashian signs up for our product today, she may not know anything about it, but if she has a bad experience, she can still very much impact whether or not anybody else ever sees it. So you got to pay attention to those regardless of how into my product they are, right?
Well, I'd say Kim
Some messaging.
Kardashian also does a pretty good job of aligning her product because isn't she like a big gazillionaire?
I'm a gazillionaire.
Yeah,
Yes.
she probably uses some sort of data when they're figuring out how to sell all that stuff to everybody.
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
Last question, Brian, I'm going to hog this one more time, and then we're going to turn it literally over to Brian. I've been obsessed lately with messaging in a different way. One that I'm not sure B2B, number one, it will work, or B, is prepared for it. Last 6 weeks, I've done some personal work. I came home, like we all have a problem, right? So you come home and let's say you have a problem. You go to the internet and you go, okay, when I get enough pain, I got to solve this problem, right? So when you're in pain, you are desperate. I'll use an easy example. People have a baby cries. They go, man, this sucks. Day 2, they go, this really sucks. Day 3, they might get into an argument. Day 4, they go online and they say, oh my God, please teach me how to make this baby not cry through the night. And they buy an ebook. But they probably just didn't buy any ebook. They probably saw 200 of them. And somewhere in there, if they are like me, they have found themselves in the journey of the messaging. If you are like this, going through this right now,
Yeah.
you might be like me and you want to learn more, right? So the consumer, the consumer journey is very, call it, it's like choose your own adventure. And now I'm like, yes, I do want to learn more. And they're like, just click this button. I'm like, son of a bitch, I thought I already signed up for that community. Just give me the product. It's like they have all these little steps, but it was very good because I left it alone. My thing. I came back to it the next day. Hey, Steve, I didn't take any action. Maybe you're in this spot. And I was like, God, they just know me. And then it was like, boom, I bought it because I was like, I don't know if this is going to fix it, but it has to do something because how does someone know what I thought was such a unique way of thinking about this problem and that I was on an island and that there's people who can solve it. There's no guarantee. But whoa, what a relief, right? So talk to me about messaging in B2B. I don't think anybody's really doing that right now. And would it work? Are we too impatient, too impersonal?
It does exist. I mean, one of the hacks that if you go talk to people that do PPC campaigns that works almost universally is, and Google will actually try to get you to do this, but like the number one kind of campaign you can build is one that almost reflects the search terms directly back to the user. So if you say crying baby, live in South Dakota, if they have a landing page that says, are you in South Dakota and have a crying baby, you will click and you will convert.
But it might have like Mount Rushmore in the back to make it personal.
There you go, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
So largely, if you can take their search terms, all you're doing is that same dating saves going, we get you, and we have what is built specifically for people just like you. They're helping you self-identify that we already have seen your product and we have built a solution that directly impacts your specific situation, right? So they're doing it on that scale, but there's a lot of problems with that. We're in a kind of phenomenon now where with the internet, you can find a niche product that really does get that specific, right? Like, hey, I'm in this city and have the crying baby, whatever. Mm-hmm. With the advent of the internet and the increase, companies are getting smaller and more, there's a phenomenon called the long tail, where it's just like, look, the phenomenon of blockbuster products is going away. We're getting more and more specific. Yeah. You're going to look for more and more niche products. And because we have the internet, we're switching from product A to product C is absolutely free. You'll do it. And for that reason, building a better solution that targets your customer and reflects to them that you have very much added and fit their very specific circumstance is how people are kind of doing it now. But what we're getting to is now, like Google will tell you need 12,000 monthly searches to have a viable campaign. And you go, no, it's not necessarily true. It depends on the lifetime customer value of your product. And if you're dealing with a lot of B2B scenarios, those search volumes don't exist, right? Mm-hmm. You'll actually have to kind of break the Google search algorithm to fit that.
Because you don't have enough people looking, right?
Yep.
Got it.
Yep. So the way you fix that is you go even more targeted.
Yeah,
right?
hyper targeted.
Hey, I'm actually in your zip code. And the more you do that, the higher your conversion rates go. You can get into, we've done 25% conversion PPC campaigns with that strategy. It does work.
So you might say, let's stop there. A founder might say, for example, selfishly again, Brian said, Brian's crafted this really good response that says, well, this is why we exist. Mm-hmm. Here's your problem. Here's not the solution, but like, hey, here's us saying we get the problem and here's our version of it. And we use the words predictable revenue. If we went to a search engine and found that there's a very low search term, we would be shooting ourselves in the foot. Is that correct? on predictable
Oftentimes,
revenue if we planted on that in our messaging strategy.
yeah. I mean, but what you could, so predictable revenue, one, but that's only one way to say it, right? There are several other keywords that help people actually achieve that phenomenon. So this is where the feature, what you just did is you focused on a keyword, a very specific keyword that had a meaning.
Yep.
Focus more on the benefit of that, because I mean, you're talking about the brand predictable revenue, or are you talking about the
Brand
phenomenon of
predictable revenue,
predictable
and
pipeline?
that predictable revenue at scale
Yeah,
is broken. It's not working,
yeah,
right? And people go,
yeah,
yep. They go, yep.
yeah.
But it's a very small slab of people. I bet there's more people who are like searching for like I wet the bed and I'm 16, to be honest with you, because like that's a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
people.
Yep.
Just that was a
So
terrible
one,
analogy, but you get it.
well, one, I mean, as Google will do right now, what they'll try to do is get you to expand your search terms to capture more of that phenomenon with different words, right?
Okay.
Predictable top line, predictable whatever. They'll swap out the synonyms for each of those words to try to increase the search volume associated with your campaign.
Okay.
How can we say it in slightly different ways? And then oftentimes they'll use like dynamic content to try to replace those words to hit those. But what you want to think about is number one, like what is the benefit that that predictable revenue actually grants that company, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what are the functional benefits? Like, okay, cool, we get planned, we get, again, predictable, we get stable income, we get stable flows. What is the emotional phenomenon that comes with that? And
Oh, and
now
see,
you're
we're
kind
going
of
against
playing
it,
with,
saying it's not working. So it's actually like a negative
yes,
keyword, right?
correct. Yeah. Ah, gotcha. But this is the same phenomenon. You're
Yeah.
basically breaking down, okay, what is the functional benefit that they are trying to get that is not being satisfied, right? Can we describe what that is? And then look at the search terms that are in that field as well, or look at the messaging methods that we have at our disposal there. And then part three is like, look, if it works as it's supposed to, right? If we actually could deliver that phenomenon of predictable revenue, predictable leads, how would they feel? Right? It's like, oh, well, cool. I'm at peace, right? And you start building content that reflects that emotional point of, look, are you looking to just be at peace when you come into work? I want some measure of stability. I want to be able to show up and say, yes, I'm doing something different every day, but I don't have to worry about feast or famine anymore, right? And now you're building messaging that says, okay, not only do I actually hit the emotional sentiment that you're looking for, but I actually understand your problem. And then when you get them that far, you start to get into the nitty gritty details and saying the keywords that let them recognize that you're specifically talking to them. Are you RevOps and specifically sick of the feast and famine day to
Yeah.
day work that actually has you pulling your hair out? Get over here. Let's put you in a program where we can absolutely start to give you some stable, predictable income that can happen over time. And you can start getting and thinking strategically about what you do next year and not what you do next week. Right.
Message
It's
to the
really funny
CEO
because
is different, right? Way
Yeah.
different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it's funny that we've come full circle back to the people don't remember what you say, but how you make them feel, which is a Maya Angelou quote, which it's one of my favorites, and it's very funny. My training's in copywriting, so like I know how to write a good message, and I always know that you need to know really well what the audience looks like in order to do some of the stuff that Steve was already discussing. The funniest thing is that I want to say, aside from Steve, most of the executive teams that I've worked for have been impressed by messaging and emails that if I looked at it as a copywriter, I would say, this is terrible. I, why did this catch your attention? How did this catch your attention? So I think one of the questions I have for you, Dan, is about like that balance between, you know, creating content that like follows the rules but that has effectiveness. AI is getting better and better at dialing really close into that sort of content, and it's such a subjective thing.
It is. And it's actually hard. And in many ways, it's actually better than I thought it would be at it. I mean, there's a study from MIT that just came out where they actually exposed to people whether or not the copy that they were being exposed to was written with AI assistance or completely by AI. And overall, they actually preferred the fully AI version before
Mm-hmm.
they knew who and what had done it. The trick there that I think, like what we will be chasing is people like this happened when pop-ups showed up. This was like early 2000 type of app. It was absolutely ridiculous. You're to the point now where your search results, they try to hide which ones are ads. They'll put like the top 3, 4 results are actually ads, and they try to bury the fact that they're sponsored as deeply as they can. At this point, the trick is going to be, how can you get closer and closer to developing a relationship with that person? You have to remember your last 5 interactions with them, right? They can start to spot this. But back then, the pop-ups started showing up. People used to put on these glasses that would track your eyeballs and start to figure out what you were looking at. And they found out that people were actually filtering pop-ups. They didn't even notice that they were there. They would just literally look around them and not recall them. They wouldn't remember that they even showed up. And I think because that, like, the premise of a lot of the one-size-fits-all content that we've been exposed to, where it's like, you guys have seen it, people are still putting out a lot of recommendations like, put an emoji in your subject line. Please. Like, sure, that works for other people that also put emojis in their subject lines, but it isn't a one-size-fits-all, and it's oftentimes a phenomenon that people do when they already know each other well. They've totally misplaced the insight to go, oh yeah, put it in I don't know about you guys, but if I see a cold email from someone with an emoji in the subject line, I go, who's this joker? No,
Yeah,
I don't know you.
I'm out.
So
I mean,
a lot of that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think that this is going to become even more important now that you brought email back up. I mean, you and your team have written a ton lately about the 2024 email changes. How do you think Wrench.AI works into solving this problem at scale of still connecting with the audience and getting closer and closer to that ideal audience or persona,
Sure,
but also managing that at scale?
Sure. When it comes down to it, overall, the solution that Wrench is, in a sentence, is, yes, we're doing segmentation. That's the, hey, we answer the phone type stuff. But the functional benefit of our technology is figuring out and helping you understand who should you talk to, what should you say, and how should you say it, right? The phenomenon and like the proof of that even working from 20 years ago was, there's another good book, The Ultimate Sales Machine, right? Where they found out basically that the people that asked more questions were ultimately the most sophisticated and successful salespeople, right? So they did their research. Long story short, really successful people oftentimes spend 40% of their day prepping for their calls, right? This, and the goal of this is to try to standardize and to package a lot of those insights in a meaningful and a data-driven way so that they're much easier to parse apart. It's much faster to say, hey, this is a data-driven person. I'm going to show them a data-driven type of solution and give them a data-driven pitch. One size does not fit all. I sometimes need social proof, like, hey, your buddies are doing it. Other times I need, hey, we're JD Power and Associates type proof. And the goal of this technology is to basically go, okay, can we look for the little nuances in the existing signals that they're putting out in their LinkedIn profile and, onto other places in the publicly available web? Their job title can tell you a lot about them. And how can we actually help you package your product and put it in front of them in a way that they prefer to see it? So the first things first, that shortens your sales cycle because you ask fewer questions in calls.
Yep.
It allows you to leapfrog a lot of the relationship boundaries with them because you already get it, right? They're already using my language and I can skip past a bunch of this stuff. And it enables you, one, to kind of develop that relationship in a shorter period of time and get to the point where now it's appropriate to send emojis in the subject line because you've passed that layer of the first formalities that are appropriate. So our goal is ultimately, who do you talk to? What do you say? And how do you say it? And how do you get there faster? I think the people that understand and will win in 2024, they're the ones that are taking this technology and actually figuring out how to standardize those approaches so that they can develop those relationships faster. And once they develop those relationships faster, how do you maintain them? Your brain is designed, Dunbar's principle, to only handle between 150 and 250 people, basically, depending on who you ask, right? But when you have tools like social networks, where, I don't even know how many it is now. Last numbers I saw, 1,200 connections was the average number of people, right?
On
kind
LinkedIn?
of expand the capabilities. This was actually across networks, and it's a while ago, so it's probably a lot bigger now.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now you have tools that kind of like subsidize, if you will, your ability to actually maintain a larger kind of social circle. And how do you start efficiently making those people feel special? People require, the pandemic accelerated online interactions by probably 10 years. We're probably now like, I don't know about you guys, I haven't done nearly as much travel as I used to. Not at all, which is a great thing because I used to have to fly weekly and I hated it.
Yeah.
But now, like, I have people at my own company I've never met in person. People with equity.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's now the norm. So the people who master that interaction, make you feel special, even if they've never even met in public, those are going to be the ones that win. And our technology is hoping to be one of those that drives that trend. So
there's kind of two big takeaways there. Like from a lot of what we've been talking about is one, AI is here and is going to continue to change rapidly. And then
yeah,
two, companies really are still stuck in the past and following the same old playbooks and trying to operate by old rules that just don't align with how people think, how people buy, how people interact with people. What advice would you give to companies to better prepare themselves for these rapid changes and keeping up with a really quickly changing landscape?
sure. I would say what we're in right now is an inflection point, meaning this is like a very specific moment in history where you're about to see like the equivalent of the Industrial Revolution. This technology is a big deal. The ones that like there are times where I would say, hey, go ahead and sit back and wait and kind of see how this one shakes out. And this is not one of those times. The challenge will be to get familiar so you can learn how to spot the smoke and mirrors, because there is, as we've discussed on this call, still a ton of smoke and mirrors out there. Just because you have an API connection to GPT does not mean anything in my book. Zero.
Yeah.
I couldn't care less. Data-driven decisions beyond that, executive level decision making that incorporates AI is a much harder task. And the people that are
Yeah.
doing that and going, okay, how do I adopt this technology, but how do I do it in a way that actually helps me deepen those relationships? And how do I build something that actually has proof that it can help me do that? That's hard. That's a much bigger deal. And those are going to be the people that are, I don't know that there's a second place in this race. This is one of those where like you need to actually get serious about it. You need to take a look at what you're currently doing, because people are, and there's McKinsey studies right now where people are penalizing people. Like, I mean, guys, if you call your cell phone operator and they make you explain why you called 3 times on the same call, like,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. People will pay for that degree of personalization. They will pay
Yeah.
for that level of experience. They will reward people, and a lot of that is not that hard to do.
Brian,
So,
I got to ask one more question. Sorry.
of course,
Lookalike audiences.
Yeah,
Okay. Walk me through that, because also I get a lot of people go, oh, yeah, that's good. And then you talk to them and you say, are you doing that? They go, oh, yeah, yeah. Next question, please. And so, like, talk to me about, like, A, what is it? B, how do you do it with Wrench? And then C, well, what's the benefit? Which seems obvious, but let's just state it for everybody.
so the phenomenon lookalike audiences are where you go and you take your pay-per-click audience and you try to get, so Facebook takes and they hide, Facebook, Google, etc., retargeting audiences, right?
Yeah.
They'll oftentimes like say, hey, we'll build a lookalike audience that's built off of similar behaviors for you. They don't give you a ton of detail on exactly what they are. They give you general type of stuff.
Yeah.
Generally this age, this demographic, this geographic. The problem is they almost never actually break them out by behaviors that are within your category. So imagine if you tried to go, yeah, you know what I'm going to do is build a lookalike audience for people who bought tires. Who bought tires? Pretty much everybody that had a car. Does that tell you who's driving a hybrid? Does that tell you who's driving a sports car? Does that tell you who's actually driving a truck? And can you think of how many different ways? Because like you can make a ton of money in sleepy industries. And so when you build those lookalike audiences, what 99% of companies are doing now is they go, well, we go look at our existing database and we take people that are customers and that's who we upload. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
You go, just so you know, a ton of those people that bought wanted nothing to do with your company at all, right? A lot of them, their boss told them they had to. They didn't want to.
Right.
They were set on that project. It had absolutely nothing to do with interest. So when you take lookalike audiences and you put them into Wrench, and we can start to segment, okay, well, who are the people that are likely to buy and what are their tendencies? Again, like participating with your product. Which ones are the early adopters that are really interested in the tech and leaning forward into it? If you segment them, you can actually start to go, well, this is the lookalike audience that we use for new products, or this is the lookalike audience that we use for low price sensitivity. And this is the lookalike audience that we use to meet plan at the end of the month when people are going to convert, but you're going to have to give them a discount to get them to do it.
Yeah.
And they're going to need much more education. You can go look at your lifetime customer value and you can see that you can make just as much revenue off of both of those groups. And so oftentimes it's actually hard to parse them apart.
Yeah.
With Wrench, we'll give people not just the lookalike audience of here are people who bought, that's a no-brainer, but here are the people that bought for specific reasons or with specific behaviors that allow you to, again, further customize the content that does a better job of mirroring, hey, we get you, We get that you've got a sports car and you're much more into it. So we can show you more sports car related content, which helps you understand that I'm talking to you and we actually are, we're talking to one and the same type of people. I'm reflecting your needs, shortening that sales cycle and increasing the likelihood of conversion. That can dramatically kind of gamify, if you want, or game the system, if you will, to get a much higher conversion rate out of those PPC and those other kind of paid campaigns, top of the funnel stuff. So
Thank you. That helps a ton.
Yeah, and I think we're coming into the end of time here, and this has been such an exceptional conversation. If our listeners to this podcast could walk away knowing three things, what do you think that they should be, Dan?
hopefully that, yes, number one, the feeling in their gut that a lot of the AI out there is a lot of smoke and mirrors is true. I mean, the reality is we're figuring it out as well. I do believe we've got a better approach to it. But number one, it's kind of listen to your gut. And there is actually an approach to actually getting into this field, getting into this technology and adopting it, but doing it with people that actually have a data-driven approach, right? These are people that are actually going, hey, we've got a method to this madness to actually do it and do it in a smart way. Number two, it's if you aren't starting to get better at who do you talk to and what do you say and how do you say it, you need to start yesterday. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. You got to start somewhere. It's like planting a tree. Best day was yesterday, but today's today. So get started. Three, starting with those people that are already under the tent, so to speak, is a hell of a lot easier. It's a hell of a lot funner. It's a hell of a lot better go-to-market strategy for those that are developing new products. And there are answers on how do you find them. It isn't like, hey, we just have to guess. It isn't just, hey, we downloaded a list. You can actually do much, much better in segmenting and getting it. It's really a lot funner. Like we've seen and done case studies where you got 8 times. We had some case studies where we actually tried to reduce the number of no's, not necessarily increase the number of yeses.
Oh, wow.
But reduce the number of no's because it burns people out. It's really hard. You can cut those by 8-fold, right? By using these methods. So those would be the 3.
Okay, so we're adapting this now. You guys will be able to see. So if you're listening to this, like we will be very vigilant about posting our data pre and post Wrench. I know that's a big deal for us at Magnetic is exposing the data. We're going to be testing this. We have a RevOps list to support it. We're scoring it in HubSpot. Brian, from a content perspective, will go, nail that messaging. We'll show you. Here's the messaging we came up with based off of what they recommended. There's the AI message. And if we lose to AI, we always say that's okay. Like,
it is okay.
No one's going to lose sleep over it. And Brian's not going to be like, that son of a bitch AI. Like, it's great. Like, if it works, great. And so we'll be doing that testing probably over the next 60 to 90 days as we spin up in the next week and onboard into this. If I'm a company and I said, God, that's really interesting what he said. What do I need to expect if I want to get started? What am I going to be paying a month? Number one, what kind of bandwidth do I need to allocate? And then thirdly, like, how do I contact you to get started?
The companies that are the best fit for this, I mean, you need to be, one, you want to have kind of slightly larger audiences. So usually we're looking for, and the best results are going to come from companies that are managing databases that are for like, from 20,000 plus people, right? When you're talking about your prospects, your go-to-market, that's kind of the bottom end. In most cases for AI to work, there are ways to get it to work at small, like statistical thresholds, right? If you have 50 conversions, that's statistical numbers. When you're getting into AI, you need 500 to 1,000 minimum.
Okay.
So you're looking for like situations
positive like, hey, things happening, right? Like even an email response, if you're just starting, would be a positive indicator. Thank you.
Exactly. Yep. Demo, 500 demos, that type of thing.
Okay.
500 customers, obviously, but yeah. The price points that you're talking about, you're getting into is like, obviously that they're getting down as we go over the years, but usually you're looking and the companies are dealing with like somewhere around probably $1,000 to $2,000 a month. Okay. That money goes in and basically largely pays for the audience and the data licenses, right? Because this technology is going to automatically research your audience. It's going to automatically research your CRM. It's going to automatically give you scores, recommendations, and messaging for that. So that money comes in, and just as a heads up, you're paying your team to do it now. This is a way better use of the same capital instead of hiring additional people. Right?
Yeah.
This is on par with like, again, last time I checked it, it was the equivalent of, I want to say it was 40 seconds of an SDR's time to accomplish about an hour and 15 minutes worth of work. So it's one of those, one, you're spending that money already. 2, you're handing a lot of those insights to your SDRs. So you're kind of taking budget and you're switching it from one place to another. And it's a much better use of it because your SDRs get more time on the phone, more time doing conversations.
Okay. So really for about 15 to 20% the cost of an SDR headcount that probably isn't producing. I could shift my entire company to be data driven with a company like Wrench.
Yep. And then we have clients that will come in that will literally say, and this is kind of one of the other kind of few benefits that a company like ours can do, but we'll have companies that come in and go, okay, I've got a lot of data and I've got a lot of proprietary data.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of really, really cool stuff and I want to build something totally unique. We have clients that are doing that. Those are enterprise contracts. They're like high 5 and 6 figures per year.
Yeah.
But in those cases, you can build your own product at that level.
Yeah.
Right? We've got clients that are building messaging recommendations for large proportions of the United States population. That's how they're doing it.
Beautiful.
So those are kind of the 3 tiers of what you can hop in and wade into the deep end and what you can get to. So,
well, we come up with
as far as finding them.
Oh, go ahead. Finance. Let's talk about the money. You said finance.
Oh, well, just financing. A lot of them, like we try to help basically like smooth those out. Like we'll do pilots. Again, we're data driven. So we'll have clients that'll come in for 30 to 60 days to actually see it work because we can ingest and connect their CRMs and we can be pumping insights to their CRM, sometimes the same day, very fast in many cases. And then the more custom the insights get, those can take a little bit longer, but you can actually see some legitimate insights very quickly.
Very cool.
So we're actually much more friendly than a lot of their expectations have been in the past. And then as far as how to get in touch with us, email us. Obviously, go hit us up at Wrench.AI is the website. And you can submit to the form there. You can email me. I'm Dan at Wrench.AI. I will respond. And info at Wrench.AI and others. Obviously, getting in touch with you guys as well if they have other questions.
Yeah. And in this, I just want everybody to know, go to the code below. You're going to see there's a special magnetic offer where we have an additional allotment of credits that we created as a partnership with Wrench. Normally, they would give you 100, which is good. We said that's not good enough. Dan said, you're right. If these guys would be pumping out content, the fans of Magnetic, I get it. So make sure you click on that link below. You can go claim that offer right now, get a good use of it for about a week or two. I say, Dan, that's enough for someone to get the idea of it. And then schedule time with Dan to dig in. Let one of us know. Obviously, we vetted the shit out of this and picked it and are kind of betting the future of our company on it in a very good way. So we feel very positive about it. Dan, thank you so much for sitting with us on this foundation episode.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's been an honor.
All right, man.